I want to be upfront that I've debated posting this for almost 2 years because there is a part of it that I still cannot fully explain, and I do not like sharing things which I can't explain. I am an accountant and my entire professional life revolve around numbers. My parents had gone to visit my sister in Portland for 10 days in October. I lived about 20 minutes from their house and they asked me to check the place every few days, water the plants, bring in the mail, that kind of thing. Their house was in a suburban neighborhood about 30 minutes outside of Phoenix, Arizona. It is the kind of neighborhood where every house looks broadly similar and the streets are quiet mostly. They had lived there for 19 years without incident of any kind worth noting. On the 5th night of my parents' trip, I decided to stay at the house overnight rather than drive back to my apartment late. I had been there until about 10, sorting through some paperwork my dad needed scanned and sent to him, and rather than make the drive, I texted my wife that I was staying over and settled in. I knew the house as well as I knew my own. I had grown up in it. I knew which doors stuck and which light switches were wired to which fixtures and where my parents kept the extra blankets. There was nothing unfamiliar about being in that house, and I was relaxed in the specific, comfortable way of a place that has 23 years of personal history behind it. I was in the main bedroom, which my parents had said I could use, watching something on my phone with the bedside lamp on, when the power went out at 11:42. I know the exact time because my phone showed it when the lamp went off and I looked at the screen. The room went from lit to dark in an instant, and the ambient hum of the house, the refrigerator, the air handling unit, the general electrical aliveness of an occupied home, all of it stopped. I lay there for a moment thinking about what to do. Arizona in October is not cold, so the loss of the air handling was not immediately a problem. I had my phone with most of its charge. I was not concerned. I figured it was either a breaker or a street-level outage, and I would sort it out in the morning if it had not resolved itself. I checked my phone for the power company outage map and found a reported outage in the general area, which was reassuring. An area outage rather than something specific to the house. I put the phone down and thought I would just go to sleep. Then I heard my parents' garage door opening. I want to be precise about this. The garage door opener in my parents' house runs on the household electrical system. When the power goes out, the garage door cannot be operated by the wall switch or the remote. There is a manual release cord that allows the door to be opened by hand when the power is out, a red cord that hangs from the drive mechanism, but operating it manually requires being in the garage and pulling the cord and then physically lifting the door. The sound I heard from the main bedroom at 11:42 was the specific mechanical sound of the garage door motor running and the door traveling on its track. The motor sound of an automatic opener, not the sound of a door being lifted by hand. An automatic garage door motor that was running despite the power being out. I sat up in the bed and I did not move for probably 30 seconds. My brain was doing the thing it does when it encounters information that does not fit. The rapid search for an explanation that works, the checking of assumptions, the revisiting of what I actually heard to see if there was a way to reinterpret it. The garage door sound was distinctive and I had heard it thousands of times growing up. I was not misidentifying it. The motor had run. I got up with my phone flashlight and went to the bedroom door and listened. The house was quiet. Whatever it had operated and stopped. I stood at the bedroom door for a full minute and heard nothing further. I went to the hallway and then to the living room, checking as I went. Nothing out of place. The kitchen was as I had left it. The front door was locked. I went to the internal door from the kitchen that connected to the garage, and I stood in front of it and listened before I opened it. Nothing from the garage. I unlocked the internal door and opened it and put my phone flashlight into the garage. The garage door was closed. My parents' 2 cars were in their correct positions. The garage was exactly as it should have been. The garage door mechanism on the ceiling was still, the drive chain hanging in its correct position, no indication of recent operation. I stood in the doorway and swept my flashlight around the entire space and found nothing out of place. I went back inside and stood in the kitchen and thought about what I had heard and what I had found and whether they could be reconciled. An automatic garage door operating on a motor during a power outage was not mechanically possible under standard conditions. The door being closed and the garage being undisturbed meant either that whatever had operated had completed a full cycle, open and close while I was getting up and coming to check, or that I had misidentified the sound. I checked the time. It had been approximately 4 minutes between hearing the sound and getting to the garage door. A garage door cycle, open and close, took about 30 seconds. 4 minutes was more than enough time for a full cycle. I went back to the main bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed and called my wife. She answered half asleep, and I told her what had happened, and she listened and said the garage door opener probably had a battery backup I did not know about, which was a reasonable explanation I had not considered. Newer garage door openers sometimes had battery backup systems that allowed them to operate during power outages. I did not know if my parents' opener had one, and it was almost midnight and I could not ask them without waking them, and I told my wife it was probably that and said goodnight and put the phone down. I did not go back to sleep for about an hour. I lay in the dark with my phone on the nightstand, and I thought about the battery backup explanation and found it plausible and also found it incomplete. A battery backup would explain the opener running during a power outage. It would not explain why the opener had run at all. Garage door openers with battery backups do not spontaneously activate. They still require a signal from a wall button or a remote or a keypad. Something had to have sent the signal that caused the opener to run. I was still thinking about this when the power came back on at about 12:50. The house hummed back to life around me, and the bedside lamp came on, and the refrigerator started, and everything was normal. I checked my phone, and the power company outage map showed the incident as resolved. In the morning, I looked at the garage door opener unit on the ceiling. It was a model I did not recognize, newer than what my parents had when I was growing up, which meant they had replaced it at some point. I looked at the back of the unit and found a battery backup module, exactly as my wife had suggested, so the opener could run during an outage. That part was resolved. I called my dad in Portland and described what had happened. He listened and asked me to check something for him. He asked me to look at the opener's log, which on newer units recorded the last several operations with timestamps. I found the log function in the opener's settings menu and read him the entries. The most recent entry was from 11:43 the previous night, which was consistent with what I had heard. The entry showed the door had opened. The entry before it showed the door had closed 1 minute later at 11:44. The entry before that was from 2 days prior when my parents had left for the airport. My dad was quiet for a moment. Then he asked me to check the exterior keypad, the numeric pad mounted on the exterior wall beside the garage door. I went outside and looked at it. It was a standard wireless keypad. My dad said that keypads like that had their own battery, and that if someone knew the code, they could operate the door from outside without needing the household power. He also said the keypad had a log of its own on some models and asked me to check it. I could not find a log function on the exterior keypad. My dad said not all models had it. He said he would have a locksmith look at everything when he got back and change the code on the keypad as a precaution. The locksmith came 9 days later, when my parents returned from Portland. He changed the keypad code and examined the mechanism and found nothing that indicated forced entry or tampering. He said the opener was functioning normally and that the battery backup was working as designed. Nobody ever explained what sent the signal at 11:43 that night. A wall button inside the garage would have required someone already being in the garage. A remote would have required someone with a programmed remote to my parents' specific opener. The exterior keypad would have required the code. None of these scenarios are impossible. All of them require a person making a deliberate choice to open my parents' garage door at 11:43 on a Tuesday night during a power outage while I was sleeping in the main bedroom 30 feet away. I have not stayed overnight at my parents' house since then. I visit during the day, and I make sure I'm gone before it gets late, and I have not explained to my parents exactly why I stopped staying over, because I do not have an explanation that satisfies me, and I am not going to offer them one that does not. My dad changed the keypad code and added a deadbolt to the internal garage door and said it was just good general security practice and left it there. I let him leave it there. The outage map showed an area power outage that night. The area outage was real. But an area outage does not explain the signal. The two things happened at the same time. The power going out and the garage door opening and I have spent 2 years trying to determine whether that was coincidence or whether it was a specific choice made by a specific person who wanted to use the darkness and was interrupted by me getting up too quickly. I do not have the answer. My older sister Jenna asked me to house sit for her and her husband for 9 days while they took their first real vacation since having kids, which meant I was staying at their place in a quiet subdivision outside Sacramento while taking care of their dog, a golden retriever named Biscuit, who I had known since he was a puppy and who I was genuinely looking forward to spending time with. I am 24, work remotely, and a 9-day stay at my sister's comfortable suburban house sounded like a nice break from my apartment. I want to say clearly that I had stayed in this house many times before, for holidays and weekends, and this was not an unfamiliar environment for me. The house was a fairly standard 2-story suburban build with 4 bedrooms, a finished basement that Jenna's husband used as a home office, a workout space, and a backyard that backed up to a greenbelt with a walking trail that ran behind a row of houses on their street. It was a normal suburban house in a peaceful neighborhood that had never given anyone in the family a reason for concern in the 6 years they had lived there. The first 4 nights were completely uneventful. I worked during the day, walked Biscuit on the Greenbelt Trail in the evenings while there was still light, made dinner, watched television, went to bed in the guest room. Routine and comfortable. On the 5th night, a Wednesday, I was in the kitchen around 9 making tea when Biscuit, who had been lying on the kitchen floor near my feet, suddenly got up and walked to the back door that led to the yard and stood there, completely alert, staring through the glass at the dark yard beyond. Dogs do this sometimes for reasons that have nothing to do with anything significant. A rabbit, a neighbor's cat, a sound at a frequency I cannot hear. I did not think much of it initially. But Biscuit stayed at that door for several minutes, not barking, just standing and staring with his ears up and his body rigid in a posture I recognized as alert rather than playful. I went and stood beside him and looked out into the yard myself and saw nothing. Just the dark grass and the fence line and the greenbelt trees beyond it, barely visible in the limited light from the kitchen. After about 5 minutes, Biscuit relaxed and walked away from the door and lay back down. I finished my tea and did not think much more about it. The second incident happened the following night, Thursday, and it followed the same pattern but with a difference that I noticed immediately. Biscuit went to the back door again, around the same time, 9-ish, and stood in the same alert posture. This time I went to the door and turned on the back porch light, which illuminated a good portion of the yard, and looked out carefully. The yard was empty. The fence was intact. Nothing visible at the greenbelt tree line. I stood there for a few minutes with the light on, and Biscuit eventually relaxed again. What I noticed, and what stuck with me after, was that Biscuit had been doing this at almost exactly the same time both nights. I am not someone who assigns significance to coincidence easily, but a dog reacting to something at the same hour 2 nights running felt like a pattern rather than chance, even though I could not identify what the pattern was pointing to. On Friday, I texted Jenna, keeping it light, asking if Biscuit normally got weird around the back door at night. She said not really. Sometimes he barked at raccoons that got into their trash, but it was not a regular thing. I said it was probably nothing and did not mention it further, not wanting to make her worry on her vacation over something that might genuinely be nothing. Friday night, the 3rd occurrence, Biscuit's behavior changed. He did not just stand at the door. He went to the door, stood for about a minute, and then began a low, continuous growl, the kind of sound I had genuinely never heard from him before in his entire life. Biscuit is not an aggressive dog. He barks at the doorbell, and that is about the extent of his vocal repertoire. The growl was sustained, low, and directed entirely at the back door and the yard beyond it. I turned on the porch light and looked out, and again saw nothing immediately obvious. But this time I looked more carefully, scanning the fence line and the grass and the tree line at the back, and after a moment I saw something at the base of the greenbelt trees, roughly 40 feet from the back fence. A shape, low to the ground, that I could not immediately classify, partially obscured by the tall grass at the trail edge. It was not moving. I watched it for almost a minute, and it did not move at all, and Biscuit continued his low growl the entire time I was watching. I did not open the door. I stood at the glass and watched, and tried to decide what I was looking at. An animal, possibly, bedded down in the grass, which would explain Biscuit's reaction without anything being wrong. After close to 2 minutes, the shape was gone, and I want to be honest that I did not see it move away. I looked away for a few seconds to check on Biscuit, who had stopped growling, and when I looked back at the same spot, the shape was simply not there. I locked the back door, which had already been locked, and I checked the front door and all the ground floor windows, which I had not done as a routine before that night, but which felt necessary after that. Everything was secure. I went up to the guest room with Biscuit, which I had not had him do before, and we both went to bed earlier than usual. Saturday during the day was completely normal, and I want to mention that because the contrast matters. Daylight in that house felt exactly as comfortable and familiar as it always had. It was only after dark that the specific feeling I had been developing over the previous 3 nights returned. Saturday night, Biscuit went to the back door again at the same time, and this time I did not wait to see what would happen. I turned on the porch light immediately and looked out and saw the shape again, in the same general location near the tree line, and this time, with the better light and my closer attention, I was able to identify enough of its outline to determine that it was not an animal. It had the general proportions and stillness of a person, low to the ground, possibly crouched or seated at the edge of the Greenbelt Trail facing the house. I stepped back from the door immediately. I got my phone and I called my sister's husband's cell, since he had mentioned he kept a baseball bat in the front hall closet for exactly this kind of situation, and I asked him where it was while explaining quickly what I was seeing. He told me and stayed on the phone while I retrieved it, and then he told me to call the police immediately and that he would stay on the line with me until they arrived. I called 911 and described what I had observed. A person-shaped figure at the edge of the Greenbelt, approximately 40 feet from the back fence, present on multiple consecutive nights around the same time, currently visible from the kitchen window. The dispatcher kept me on the line and told me a unit was being dispatched. I stayed in the kitchen with the lights on, the bat within reach, and Biscuit beside me, and I watched the spot at the tree line. The shape did not move during the entire time I waited, which was approximately 11 minutes. When the patrol car arrived, with its lights off as the dispatcher had instructed to avoid alerting anyone, 2 officers came to the front door and I let them in and walked them through what I had observed over the previous 4 nights. They went out the back door with flashlights and walked the yard and the fence line and into the Greenbelt itself. They were out there for almost 20 minutes. What they found was a flattened area in the tall grass at the edge of the Greenbelt Trail, directly in line with the kitchen window, showing the specific compression pattern of a person having sat or crouched in that exact spot repeatedly over an extended period. The grass damage indicated, in the responding officer's assessment, more than a single occasion. They found no person in the immediate area when they searched it, and the Greenbelt Trail extended for over a mile in both directions, connecting to multiple other neighborhoods, which meant someone could have left along the trail in either direction well before the officers reached the yard. They also found, near the flattened grass area, several cigarette butts, which they collected, and a discarded energy drink can, which they also collected. Both were processed but never led to an identification that I was ever informed of. The officer who spoke with me before leaving told me, as gently as he could, that the pattern I described, someone returning to the same observation point at the same time on consecutive nights, watching a specific window of a specific house, was consistent with what he called pre-offense surveillance, and that whatever this person's ultimate intention had been, my decision to call when I did, and the dog's consistent alerting before I could see anything myself, had likely disrupted something that had not yet reached the point of action. My sister and her husband came home 4 days early. They did not blame me for anything, and they were grateful that Biscuit's behavior had given me the warning that it had, repeatedly, across 4 nights, well before I could see anything with my own eyes. They had a privacy fence extension installed along the greenbelt side of their property within a month and added motion-activated lighting that covers the entire yard from multiple angles. I still do not know who was at that tree line or what they intended. I know that a dog noticed something was wrong on the very first night before there was anything visible to a person, and continued noticing it for 3 more nights while I gradually moved from dismissing it to believing it completely. I trust Biscuit's instincts over my own visual assessment of an empty-looking yard now without hesitation, and I think that is probably the single most useful thing this entire experience taught me, even though it took 4 nights and a police report to learn it.